This is Josh Reeves, and you're listening to the Mile High Church podcast. Hey, right now we have early bird tickets on sale to view Valerie Kaur, who's coming to Mile High on October 3rd. She's the author of the incredible memoir, See No Stranger, and she's going to be right here in person, but you can get a ticket to see her right here at Mile High or to watch online. Check out that and more at milehighchurch.org.
What a gift it is to be here today and to speak to you about the sound of silence. And not just about the sound of silence, but also about the voice of the divine feminine. Within the sound of silence, there's a resonance, there's a vibration that comes to us. And that very vibration can be felt more than heard. It doesn't speak in words. It is a presence. It is subtle. It is filled with grace. And that is the voice of the divine feminine. In a world that rushes and shouts and is filled with noise, the divine feminine invites us into stillness, to slow down, to soften, and to truly listen. This year at Mile High, our initiative is the divine feminine. You see that brilliant sign out in our lobby that was created by our so talented graphics and marketing team. They placed each one of those petals on the rose. And one of the reasons that the ministerial team chose the divine feminine as our central focus point, our initiative for this year, is to bring it forth, to rise it up, to highlight it, so that we each have an invitation to dive a little bit deeper, to feel it a little bit more, to embody that sense of the feminine. Because the divine feminine is way beyond gender. It exists in all of us. And it is that essence and that energy that invites us into a deeper sense of vulnerability, into a deeper sense of being able to be present to and to feel our feelings, into the embodiment, to feeling the embodiment of spirit within ourselves, into the spiritual practices that can join together this year. We can go into sensing and to knowing the divine feminine and to bringing it back into balance with the divine masculine within ourselves. Yeah. Not at the expense of the masculine, but in communion and in collaboration with it. You know, when we're in touch with the divine feminine as a concept, then as an essence, then we are in touch with the breath and the breadth of compassion. We are in touch with the pulse of intuition, with the still small voice of wisdom that arises when we become quiet enough to listen. And the divine feminine is all about trusting in divine guidance, letting go and letting God, a deeper surrender and a receptivity so that we can open our hearts and feel the presence of the divine that's always right here within us. And so today we're focused on silence and how silence can be one of the entry points with which we move into a deeper awareness of the divine feminine within and how we move into balancing it within us. You know, I grew up in the 1970s, and within my house, we had a canvas of music. Maybe you imagine for yourself for a moment a canvas of music that you grew up within your house. But in my household, we had Joan Baez, we had Joni Mitchell, Neil Diamond, ABBA, we had Judy Collins, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Simon and Garfunkel. And my dad, who was adept at nicknames, he nicknamed me and all of my friends, much to my dismay, that would come over to our house. He would give us nicknames. And during my awkward years, I had quite a few of those. And I don't know if you did, but you'll see some coming up on the screen right here. My dad would call me Garfunkel. You can kind of see the wisdom into where he was coming with that. If you can just see beyond the glasses. But a few weeks ago, I had a chance to travel back to Chicago to be with my mom and my sister for my mom's 75th birthday. And we purchased tickets for all of us to go see Paul Simon's farewell concert at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra building downtown. And I actually found out later that my parents had a date early on to a Paul Simon and Garfunkel concert down at Southern Illinois University. And they saw the debut of The Sound of Silence and Bridge Over Troubled Water before they had even been released yet. And so it was a really special night. And as we gathered there in the theater, I was so touched as I could feel the currents moving through the room, the excitement, the nostalgia. At break, I could hear people time traveling together as they connected. Where were you when you heard that song? What was happening in the world when this song touched your life? And I could feel that reverence that came over the room. And when he closed with The Sound of Silence, you could feel the room was blanketed with a sense of connection. You know, I left that night in contemplation of the power of the message of the sound of silence. And I left with this idea of considering the divine feminine and how the divine feminine calls to us, speaks to us, can be felt within us when we gather in silence. And so today I want to look at 3 different ways that we can use this sound of silence in order to cultivate, to tend to both our relationship to silence, but also our relationship and our awareness of the divine feminine within us. And the first one is to make space for silence in your life. The divine feminine is specifically calls for us to make space, teaches us how to receive, to be receptive, and how to open our hearts as if they are blooming open. You know, when we encounter things in the world, when we encounter pain, when we encounter threat, you know, it's a natural tendency to want to shut down, to close off, to protect, to come in within. I know for me, I want to withdraw. I want to guard more. And not only in the instance of pain or in the instance of strong emotions, but we also close our hearts when we are constantly seeking and striving and achieving and doing, when it's out of balance, right? There's a time for it. But when we are reaching without not a sense of having, when we are seeking without a sense of knowing, then we also are closing ourselves off. We're closing ourselves down. And, you know, recently we were able to look at this teaching of closing down, and the closing down that comes from both in response to pleasure or seeking or achieving or reaching for, and in response to pain. And we learned it recently in our Women Mystics class. We looked at the teachings of Rabia. Rabia, who was a saint that came from the 8th century, she was known mostly for her devotion, but she was also known for the purity of her heart, the profoundness of the way with which she approached her reverent connecting with the divine. You know, she lived simply, without title, without wealth, sometimes without even shelter. But it was said that her very presence was one of love and devotion. There's a story, a legend that goes with the teachings of Rabia. It said that one day she was walking down through the middle of her village, and she was seen holding in one hand a torch and in another hand a bucket of water. And she was walking and marching through the center of her village, and someone curiously came up to her and said, "Rabia, why are you holding fire and water?" To which she replied, "I'm going to set fire to paradise and pour water on hell, so that these veils may fall away, that people may love God, not for reward, not out of fear, but purely for the purpose of love itself. And she was talking about how through our practice, we can bring ourselves into an experience of unconditional love. A condition, a place that exists in all of us when we let go of the highs of paradise and the lows of negativity that make up the world around us. Beyond those conditions, there is a place. And she said, what is the key that we can do in order to get there? Devotion. That's the key. The story reveals the ultimately flowering of our heart. When love is no longer transactional or conditional, but it simply flows forth from the awareness at the center of our being. The unconditional love that we can touch there. In Sufi terms, this true opening of the heart is when fear and desire no longer cloud the mirror of our awareness, and the heart becomes clear enough to reflect only the beloved. The heart chakra, this subtle energy body that is known to us, it's found in cultures throughout the world. But in Sanskrit, this heart chakra, this energy of the heart chakra, it's called anahata. Anahata. Anahata literally means the unstruck sound of life and the sound of the celestial realm, the buzz and the vibration that can be felt when we are still enough to feel it, to sense it, to awaken to it. Right there. When we spend the time in silence, then we spend time cultivating a connection in that place. And this anahata also stands for unhurt, unstruck. So if you think of that from an individualized point of view, it's that place in ourselves that exists, that is eternal, beyond the stories of our life, beyond the places that we have been hurt in life, where we have been touched by pain. That's the anahata, the untouched, the unstruck place. And it's the place where the vibration of oneness can be sensed, can be felt. On the way in today, you might have received an affirmation card. And on it, on one side of it, you'll see a picture of the anahata chakra. And on the other side, you'll see an affirmation. Guess what? There's 2 different affirmations on the cards. And you can trust that the one that you were given is perhaps the one that is meant for you. And if you don't feel that, then trade with your neighbor if you feel like it. Or there might be an extra on the way out. But that affirmation card is designed that you might take it into your meditation practice. You might consider that unstruck sound that comes from the very vibration of your being. And that through your spiritual practice, you can work to just get quiet, to sense that place where all is well, all is still, all is. The affirmations, one of them says, as I dwell in the boundless space of my heart, I sense that all life is held in sacred unity. Or perhaps you got the affirmation of the unstruck sound of my soul guides me into stillness, presence, and love. So we focus on receiving. By receiving, we simply let go and let God, making space for the gifts of silence. That brings us to our second point this morning, which is to listen beyond words. The divine feminine calls us to listen beyond words, and this is about allowing ourselves to pause, to rest, to center, to rejuvenate, to restore, so that we have cultivated a reservoir within ourselves, and we have the capacity then to connect, to serve, and to listen to others. You know, I have found so many gems in this book. I am so excited that Valerie Kaur is coming here on October 3rd this year. You know, when this book came out in 2020, this is the copy. I went right out and bought it. And I have to tell you, I circled so many things. I even circled the dedication of the book. I didn't even get past the dedication before I was like, whoo, that's good. Whoo, that's a good thing. And the reason is that I opened it up, and there in the very dedication, you see I put little hearts on it. And you know why it spoke to me so very much is that so powerfully she says, this is a book for anyone who feels breathless. This is a book for anyone who feels heartbroken when they look at the world around them or when they've experienced pain in the world. And I said, oh, I relate to that. I don't want to feel breathless. I want to find my breath. And so I began to read, and this book is chapter after chapter and line after line and page after page of stories of how to meet pain in the world, how to meet generational trauma, how to meet terrorism, the acts of terrorism. And she goes very deeply into all of her experiences in these areas of trauma and terrorism. And she says that we can meet all of these things because it is a labor of love. But we have to be able to connect with our own breath first, to restore our own hearts first, to work on cultivating that reservoir of connection within us so that we can listen beyond the stories of pain, first to ourselves and then to those around us. Sometimes it is so hard to hear what people are saying, but to feel that deeper pulse of the deeper sense of the divine is what she's calling us to do. She says we can be available and listen more deeply. Deep listening, she writes, is about drawing close to someone's story. Drawing close to someone's story. She continually highlights these aspects, these invitations of the divine feminine as calls to slow down, to rejuvenate. And she includes on page 246, she shares a quote from Thomas Merton when he said, "There is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs, and that is activism and overwork. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything is to succumb to violence." He says the frenzy of our activism neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our own inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitlessness of our own work because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. He's not saying don't stand for peace. Don't act for peace in the world. He's saying first we have to care and meet ourselves with gentleness. First we have to breathe. So she puts this she puts this activity in the book, and I invite you, if you feel called right now, she says, just place a hand on your chest. She says, take a deep breath. Feel your heart beating in your chest. You are alive. You are here. Look around you. Look around you. What is the most beautiful thing you can see right now? And she says, let yourself wonder at it. No matter what is happening out there in the world right now, no matter how dark, how violent, or how cruel, this beautiful thing also exists. The world right here is just as real as the world out there. She says, now, who can you share that beautiful thing with? She writes, you don't have to make yourself suffer in order to serve. So the call is to care for ourselves. She says, you belong to a community Your life has value, and we need you alive. The unstruck sound of silence is not heard by our ears, but by keeping our hearts open and by pausing and listening beyond the words that are in front of us. And that brings us to the final point today, is that the divine feminine calls us back to embody the experience of silence, to embody the experience of silence, and to take a really good look at our relationship to it. What is your relationship with silence? Do you crave it? Do you long for it? Do you court it? Do you date it? Do you spend time with it every day, nurture your relationship? Do you fall into a deep, loving embrace with it? Or do you kind of avoid it? It's a little uncomfortable. It's a little bit too much. But just the call is to just take an account of what is your relationship to silence. Now more than ever, silence is this precious, precious gift, and we can treat it as such. And it becomes not only an offering then, just to ourselves, but the more that we are able to cultivate that deep connection within, the more we have the capacity to share it out in the world. The altar of the heart becomes the altar of stillness, and the altar of stillness can be seen to become an altar of darkness. The song, it says, "Hello, darkness, my old friend." We can take that so many ways, can we not? We could touch those dark places within us with gentleness, befriend them, or we can see darkness as our friend, a place where we sit in the cave of silence to commune more deeply with a sense of the divine. It's written in Isaiah 45:3, "I will give you the treasures of darkness and riches hidden in secret places, so that you may know that it is I, the Lord, who call you by name." So I wonder if you might imagine a time in your life where you had that moment where perhaps you had a relationship with darkness that brought you into a deeper sense of silence. I know for me, I can think of a moonrise on a really snowy, ice-cold night years ago. I had skied with a friend into the backcountry at midnight, and we were standing there in the blanketed snow in the forest, and all of the snow, as the full moon was there, was lit as if like little lunar rainbows were all over, ice crystals. And I remember in that moment, thermos of tea in hand, I felt that deep power of stillness, that deep gift of silence. We can connect with it right then and there. By whatever it is that you brought to your imagination, there is that moment of stillness, that moment of silence. And today we're going to close with a contemplative meditation using sound. And it comes to us from the Vijnana Bhairava, a text that is thousands of years old. Before it was written down 1,200 years ago, it was passed orally for thousands of years. And it is a conversation between Shiva and Shakti, between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And it's a series of 112 meditations. We're just going to do one, don't worry. Just going to do one, but it's a series of meditations that are designed to bring us deeply into focus so that we can allow our awareness to simply open to that ground of beingness, to that place where we feel that pulse of that unconditional love within. In verse 38, it says, "Listen to the subtle inner sounds that are not caused by any external sources. They're continuous, like the roar of a waterfall. Become adept at merging in these manifestations of the infinite in the form of sound, and you will become the infinite. And so we're going to use the gong this morning, this beautiful instrument that has been gifted to Mile High, that it holds this presence on our stage up here, and it's going to be a gentle experience of the gong. But what I invite you to do is just if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and begin to breathe in and out. You allow the sound waves of the gong to just wash over you, and that the gong will crescendo, but then it will just taper to silence. And this meditation is about following the sound until you can hear no more sound, and just resting in that place. And so I invite you to go within right now and just begin to receive and to breathe. So we move right now, feeling the power of that stillness, feeling the power of silence, and allowing it to just open our hearts to that divine pulse within. For I know that that divine pulse is a pulse of the infinite, and that Spirit speaks in the language of silence. And so what I know for each one of us here this morning is that we befriend silence as a space in which we touch the divine, where we open to receive and to know that the divine touch is always within us. It is a touch that is eternal. It is a divine spark that never goes out. And so what I know is that each heart here opens and blooms into a deep sense of knowing, of feeling, and experiencing the embodiment of the divine. And so from that space of feeling and knowing the divine is right here present within us at all times, we become ambassadors for peace. we become ambassadors for love. And by the very nature of our being, it is in our presence that healing and light and radiant transformation filters out into the world around us. I say thank you, Spirit, for this opportunity to gather in community, to feel and mirror back to each other the divine within. Thank you, Spirit. And so it is.
Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.